Yo, I'm gonna do a video displaying why I think Thomas Aquinas leads you to the God of Kant into pantheism. Okay, I'm a presupposition apologetics, and I like Van Til. I like R.G. Rushdoony, and I'm not an expert on Aquinas. I just read a good amount of Rushdoony, and I've read Defense of the Faith by Van Til and Introduction to Systematic uh, Introduction to Systematic Theology. I've read a couple books, but mostly I think it makes perfect sense when you read Calvin and Institutes too. Um, the knowledge of self and the knowledge of God are so intertwined that it's really impossible to know which of those things came first. But your knowledge of God informs your knowledge of self, right? Because God is the creator. So all things are original with God. So scripture declares that we have a God that is infinite, eternal, but yet knowable, right? So we know God, but yet he's infinite and we're finite. So how does that work? Because the problem with the many and the one, right? And the Van Til solution is just presuppose the God of Scripture, understand that God is the original, we are derivative, and that we have to presuppose the original to even know self, right? Our autonomy is not original with ourselves. If our autonomy, our self knowledge was original with ourselves, then you would have God, self, and knowledge. It's like three things going on there, which is really not right because God is one. God is the original. So Plato, Aristotle, and Aquinas start with knowledge, causality as being original with man, right? Our knowledge of things is real and on the same level plane as with God, right? God knows 2 plus 2 equals 4, and so do we. So that knowledge is independent of God and it can be considered original, right? The problem with that, people like Aquinas, because he starts with causality and he gets you to be able to prove that there's a God, right? The problem is that he's not proving the God of Scripture, right? Because the God of Scripture is both infinite yet knowable, right? And the God of Plato is basically the God of Kant. It's an infinite outside force that is not knowable. Okay? This is what my opinion. Okay? Other people may have other opinions, but my opinion is when you start with original knowledge as man, right? My original knowledge, I'm assuming that my self knowledge starts with me and I'm working my way out to know more things, right? And every of those things declare causality, declare a creator, right? And they get me to the infinite creator, God, right? The problem with that is if you start with self, right, you're working towards God, right? You're going to start with the finite and get to the infinite. And the infinite is unknowable for a finite being, right? My personal self knowledge, if it is original with me, eventually will get me to an infinite God that I can't know, right? Which is the God of Plato, which is the God of Aristotle, the God of Kant, right? So, in trying to prove God using causality and knowledge, you get to a God that is unknowable and denies all knowledge. So, if you start with Kant, with original knowledge, start with Aquinas and original knowledge, with Plato, with Aristotle, with the universe, with energy, causality, you're gonna get to an unknowable God, right? You can get all knowledge, all matter can be reduced down into energy. The energy can be reduced down into motion, motion, you need a pusher. That's the God of Plato. As an infinite outside force that is unperceivable and unknowable. You start with original causality, starting with all of man's self-knowledge. Eventually, you're going to have to get to an infinite outside force. That infinite outside force will be unknowable for people. You get to the God of Kant. So when you would see the universe, in order to make it knowable, you ultimately have to say the universe is only knowable because God is the universe, and I'm part of that. That's how I know things. Then you get to pantheism, right? So when Aquinas starts with self-knowledge, starts with the autonomous self, original knowledge with man, is a baby step to getting to the God of Plato. The God of Plato is basically the God of Kant, right? So if you want a God that's infinite and yet knowable, you have to presuppose the God of Scripture, which gets you to Van Til. So if you don't want Kant, you got to get to Van Til, right? Calvin, Van Til, Rushdoony, Bonson, all the people, you might not like them, but if you go down Plato, Aristotle, and Aquinas, start with self and move to God. You're starting with nothing and moving into a void that is unknowable. You got to start with the knowability and then work towards yourself. My opinion, I don't know. Think about it. Bye.